Hi, good morning. Everybody, these are the brushes I use, and you can see there's quite a few of them. So just pause the video and have a look. You'll see that most of them are Rosemary & Co brushes that I get from England. They're awesome, they're not expensive. Most of the professional artists I know love them and use them. So yeah, and there are also other cheaper options you can get locally. But peruse them and I will show you how I use them. So this is a rigger brush. It's a cheap one. I would prefer to have a really good one because they can make the most incredible marks. You can see here, you can create sort of branch ends, and you've got to sort of practice using this brush because it depends on how you actually use it as to the mark you're going to get. So sometimes if you just drag the paint along or you're very gentle with your brush stroke, you can get very fine lines, but if you push it down, it's going to become thicker. So really a rigger is something you spend a little bit of time practicing so that you can get that very fine line. And here I'll do my signature with it. And I love the fact that the ferrules are longer. You can see how long the ferrules are. That's the hair part of them. And then you can see that you can really get that very sort of painterly feel. You don't have as much control with a rigger because of those long ferrules. And here you see I'm just really going very interestingly by pushing that brush down and seeing how much thicker the lines get. If you want to create thin lines like grass or reeds, then you're sort of practicing how you can push that brush up and create the thin line on the end. Dragging it along also creates a very thin line. And then if you're doing something like hair on an animal, you can learn how to create that mark and with what strength to push it down with. Here you can see I've got a little bit of a munted brush that I've kept, and you can see the different marks you can make by pushing it down. And when you're wanting to do a tree but you don't want to create that idea of every leaf, but you want the mind to fill in the blanks, then you can make those marks to do that with a brush. This brush there is no control with it, so you can see here I'm trying to create a trunk, but it's hard because the brush is a bit munted, as I say. But again, you want to create that look of foliage, then you can play around with old brushes that have become a little bit tattered, and you can find what marks you can make that create that impression. Sometimes a brush just wears down and that's the mark you get. Grass, bushes, anything. And the edge is what creates that sort of sense of movement through a painting. So that little tree that I've just created there could be a distant tree, and those edges are exciting and interesting. This brush is a Rosemary & Co brush. I think it's a number 10, and you can see you can actually load it with paint and then fill in an area with it. It's also what's called a flat, so you can create architectural kind of marks that are consistent and straight. So sometimes, you want to create that very sort of professional architectural line. Well, this is a brush that can do quite a few things. It can fill in a space, but it can create the right line you want because that brush is so beautifully made. It's a synthetic brush, but it's very hardy. This particular brush is a very cheap, it's actually a Langnickel brush, but it's very cheap. And again, I'm showing you how to create that architectural edge by using the side of a brush. I had a commission once to paint a cargo ship by the proud owner of the cargo ship, and I really learned about using the straight edges of brushes to create this ship that wasn't realistic, but the edges made it look quite contextual and quite real. So that was a big learning curve. These brushes here are your Series 279. They're from the Master Series in Rosemary & Co. I don't know what their bristle is, whether it's like a mongoose or sable hair, but they're soft, and so you can actually create beautiful edges with them, and also move edges with them. So you can see here I'm blending a little bit, but you can see here I'm pulling that paint across to soften that edge, and then I come along and I'm actually softening and blending. So they're a really good brush for once you've put down all your paint, coming in and just making the edges work for you. These brushes can be very useful for really making your painting look quite painterly. And you can see here they can actually fill in as well. So they're not just for edges. You can do a lot with them. These brushes are very interesting brushes. They are very, very cheap. I think the brushes cost $1 each. They're hog hair brushes, and they're quite surprising in their ability to hold a lot of paint. So in actually, creating large areas in a painting, a landscape, they're fantastic. And one of my heroes in terms of landscape painting in Australia uses these pretty much predominantly to paint with. And they are amazing because when he wants to look for flat areas like atmospheric mountains in the back or hills or even sky, he'll use these brushes to deliver his paint to the canvas, and with very satisfactory results. So he swears by them, he orders them in, and he predominantly uses them. Now, this brush is a short flat, and a short flat is often called a bright, and it's a softer bristle, but also has that wonderful sort of flat edge that you can use and create a really beautiful strong mark with. It also holds a good amount of paint, so they're useful for all sorts of things. You can fill in, you can create edges, you can add paint to. You can even use them for very loose style. A lot of landscape artists or a lot of people in very loose contemporary graphic styles use those short flat brushes because they're quite springy and they can hold a lot of paint. But these guys, this is a Neef brush, the white brush, and the green handled brush is a Neef brush. It's a fairly user-friendly, easy paintbrush to use and can do a lot of things. Again, getting your lovely strong edges, filling in with paint, doing a lot of quick painting. So when you're doing when I'm doing still lives, I love to move very quickly when I'm doing pleinair still lives or alla prima still lives, and just to lay your foundational paint down. This is a little excerpt from a little video I've done on pleinair painting. And here I'm just showing you how you can use a short flat brush which is loaded with paint, and I'm painting the top layer of sand, the lighter bits. So I've got the dark under layer that you can see, and then over the top I'm loading the paintbrush with paint and dabbing paint marks down with that loaded paint to create the idea of the lighter areas of sand. Then I can come over with a 279 Masters brush and I can blend that in a little bit, leaving some of those edges and blending some of them. So the 279 brush is the Rosemary & Co brush, and it's part of their Masters range. So this is a very cheap brush I picked up in the art shop. I think it was about $4 or $5. It's very soft, and you can see how you can use it to blend with. Now, I'm just very softly and gently stroking over this paint, and you can see how I can soften all those edges and create a muted down background with it. Here you could see it in action on a painting I've done from one of the videos on pleinair painting. You can see me actually softening back some of those edges from the surf in the distance there, from the shadows, and it can be very useful for that effect. This is also one of my cheap brushes that I use for putting on gesso. It's big enough and I can just put my layers of gesso on with it. Buy it from any art store. In this little video clip, I'm painting Maggie, and for the very fine areas like the eyes, I'm using a Kolinsky Sable number 2 or number 4. And you can get whatever size small synthetic watercolor brushes to do the same job. That brings my brushes to an end, but I've kept my favorite till last, and if you don't get any other brushes, these brushes will do everything you need them to do. Thank you for watching.